Working for your favorite candidate while walking your dog? There may well be an app for that. We'll talk about it next on Global Perspectives.
This program is made possible in part by funding from the UCF Global Perspectives Office, the Global Connections Foundation, and the India program at UCF.
This is Global Perspectives with Pulitzer Prize-winning commentator John Bercia, Special Assistant to the President for Global Perspectives at the University of Central Florida.
Welcome to the Global Perspective Show. We've all seen the rise of social media and how they play an ever-increasing role in our daily lives. Today, you cannot go anywhere without hearing about Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and countless others. Everyone has a blog, everyone has something to say, and everyone wants to find new audiences. From political activists in the Middle East taking on entrenched leaders to political campaigns aiming to energize voters, social media's ability to spread information quickly cannot be overestimated. Our guest today is a pioneer in this field. As chief blogger for President Barack Obama's 2008 campaign, Sam Graham-Felsen and his team utilized social media to raise $500 million online, develop an email list of millions, and create thousands of YouTube videos. Today, he is a regular speaker and consultant on how the internet is changing politics, nonprofits, and businesses. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us how you got into the whole business of political campaigns. Was this something you had planned to do, or you were in the right place at the right time and had the skills?
Certainly I was not planning to do it. In college, I majored in social studies, which is not a third grade class. It was actually a combination of economics, history, sociology, anthropology. And I wrote a little bit for my college newspaper, wrote some editorials. That got me interested in journalism. After college, I went to intern for Frontline, the PBS news program. After that, I went to intern for The Nation magazine. I ended up staying at The Nation to do reporting and editorials, mostly focused on youth politics. I was covering campuses, protests that were happening not just in America, but globally. And I began to pay attention to Barack Obama's candidacy, actually before he was a candidate, because I noticed a Facebook group that had emerged, created by some young people, urging Obama to run for president. Turned out that it was called 1 Million Strong for Obama. They never got to 1 million. I think they got to a few 100,000, but it was the fastest growing group in Facebook history. And I wrote an article about it for The Nation. I began to pay more and more attention to how Obama's campaign was using social media to reach out to and cultivate the youth vote. And in the process, I just got sort of so fascinated by what the social media team was doing that I ended up applying for a job, and 2 weeks later I moved to Chicago and left my life behind to embark on quite an adventure.
My gosh, and the numbers we just talked about are phenomenal. Did you ever anticipate they'd be anywhere near that high?
Well, I have to say, I had an inkling that there was something historic that was happening. Part of the reason why is because I just saw that young people were excited about this campaign, unlike anything I'd ever seen. I mean, I had never seen my peers be excited about any leader other than maybe Jon Stewart, if you call him a leader. So I knew something was happening, and I also knew early on in my interviews with some of the early donors that it wasn't just young people. There were a lot of older people who, many of whom were Republicans, there were independents, but a lot of people who were united around kind of the same story of being jaded and disaffected by the political process and the way that campaigns are usually run, which is candidates reaching out to the wealthiest and most powerful people and kind of ignoring the little guys. And finding, and these people who were so jaded by that process were finding hope in the Obama campaign. A lot of comparisons to Bobby Kennedy. So I knew something was happening, for sure. And I hoped that he was going to win. I wasn't positive he was going to win. I knew it was a huge uphill climb. But certainly, I couldn't have imagined raising, being a part of a team that raised $500 million, or a team that raised $13 million off of one email. Those numbers are incredible. And it's still kind of stunning in retrospect, but something was happening in the country at the time, and we were able to tap into that energy and really just combined a respect for our grassroots supporters with kind of a scientific approach of testing out different hypotheses of what will and won't inspire folks, what will and won't organize them, and it worked out amazingly well. So.
And it was one of the early cases where social media began to come into the mainstream conversation. And I'm wondering, what lessons do you think people in this country and other countries took away from that experience, especially in terms of using social media not just for campaigns, but for other purposes?
Well, previous to the Obama campaign, social media and the whole internet was still kind of seen to some degree, I think, as a geek fest, sort of a sideshow. On countless previous campaigns, the internet team were often, asked to fix somebody's BlackBerry or to, fix the printer, load the new cartridge in the printer. They were kind of treated as, the redheaded stepchild, if you will, of the campaign. On the Obama campaign, we started out as a small team, maybe 8 people. We grew to 100 by the end of the campaign. We were actually the biggest part of the staff. So by the end of the campaign, it was clear that the social media team wasn't some kind of ancillary part of the campaign. It was integral to the campaign. And I think after this historic success of obviously electing the nation's first African American president, somebody who was not given a very good shot of winning when he first ran, I think a lot of people have woken up to the incredible power of embracing social media. And the most important aspect of it, and not just embracing it for political purposes, but for nonprofits and for businesses. And I think the most important lesson from the campaign is that social media gives ordinary people extraordinary power. It gives you a megaphone to broadcast your views and opinions to thousands of people instantaneously. It gives you the ability to immediately find other people that share your values, reach out to them and start seeing if they want to organize with you for change. It gives you the ability to basically create strength in numbers in a totally accelerated way. I mean, in the past, if you wanted to start a movement, you had to put up flyers, you had to do a lot of groundwork, you had to do a lot of face-to-face recruiting to get people to come out and join you. As we saw in Egypt, I mean, they were able to create a 100,000 strong movement in large part because Facebook instantaneously allowed all of these people to come together, connect over their shared values, and get out on the streets. So that's the real power of social media, is that it gives an ordinary person this extraordinary power because of their ability to connect and organize with others.
Social media also changed the game. In 2008, many candidates, even on the Democratic side, were using traditional strategies, traditional ways of reaching prospective voters. And this method obviously had a tremendous amount of capability to draw them in. Do you think that in the upcoming round of elections in 2012 that more candidates on both sides, in fact from all parties, will be employing social media?
I do. I think at this point, if you don't have a blog or a Facebook account or a Twitter handle, it's just hard to take you seriously as a 21st century candidate. There are now 800 million people on Facebook. Soon there will be 1 billion people on Facebook. The fastest growing demographic using Facebook are people over the age of 55. So it's not child's play anymore. It's not it is the way that an entire generation of people are communicating on a daily, frankly, minute-to-minute basis at this point, especially with the rise of mobile, technology, of the mobile internet. People are carrying around their entire social networks with them wherever they go. So to ignore that vastly powerful tool is the height of folly at this point. But I will say that I'm surprised that more candidates haven't been emulating the type of engagement that the Obama campaign is displaying with its grassroots supporters. There are a few Republican candidates who are trying and experimenting a little on the internet, but many of them are playing it quite traditionally and using the internet and using social media not as this two-way conversation tool, which is really what makes social media social. I mean, it's social media because it's a two-way dynamic, and they're using it as a one-way broadcast tool, much the same way television and print is used, to basically say, here's my message, take it or leave it. And the new model really is about saying, here's my message, here's where I stand, here's my story, but what's your story? How do you react to my ideas? And if you have new ideas to, add to my ideas, I want to hear them. And I haven't seen that much of that going on the Republican side, but I think that will change as the campaign progresses, because it's just, if they don't embrace it, it's too much of an advantage for Obama, frankly.
Are there any new or emerging technologies that you think will be part of this game as we move into the future in time for the 2012 elections?
Absolutely. The biggest difference in the 2012 elections from 2008 is the rise of mobile. I mean, anyone who's buying a new phone at this point, unless you're the biggest Luddite in the world, is getting an iPhone, a BlackBerry, a Droid, some kind of smartphone. So that just means, there are infinitely more people with the mobile internet than there were in 2008. I mean, we were pretty geeky, so we went down to the Apple Store. A few of us from the Obama internet team went down to the Apple Store and got an iPhone on the day it came out. But the iPhone was not at all a very relevant part of our strategy in 2008. It was just too new. It wasn't developed enough. I think this time around you're going to see a lot more volunteering that is augmented by the use of the mobile internet. I can give a couple examples. Imagine if you're walking your dog, in your neighborhood, and you're taking a leisurely stroll. You've got a few extra minutes. You could pull up a campaign app on your iPhone or your Droid, and you could find 5 likely voters, on the path of your dog walk, knock on some doors, and immediately enter data and send it back to the campaign. You could even, in theory, the technology is there to do this, you could knock on a door, and if somebody said, well, I don't want to vote for your candidate because he wants to take away my guns. Well, you could pull out your iPhone and immediately bring up a video clip of the candidate saying, I will never take away your guns. So it really gives unprecedented power for people to make a difference on a campaign wherever they are. When I first volunteered on a political campaign, I was in college. It was 1999, and I volunteered for Bill Bradley. I was in college in Massachusetts, and I literally had to get on a bus and go to New Hampshire just to get into an office and look at a piece of paper with some names on it and phone numbers, right? So I had to go 2.5 hours on my way to make a difference. In 2008, through these new technologies, we allowed people to make a difference from their home. They no longer had to go to a physical office. And in 2012, you don't even have to be home. You can make a difference anywhere.
So how do you think this is going to affect the way the campaign plays out? It really does depend on how effectively you use these new media.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the campaigns that empower their volunteers to use these tools are going to be the ones that are most successful. A lot of campaigns and a lot of candidates are still nervous about social media because there are these downsides. They're nervous about somebody, knocking on a door without being trained by a staffer because they're worried, oh, what if they say something strange? What if they say something that's off message? And frankly, that is a bit of a risk when you give people tools to go make a difference and be, frankly, spokespeople for a campaign. But it's clearly, in my opinion, it's a risk worth taking because the payoffs are so huge. So I think it's gonna. I think what you're going to see is campaigns that allow people that give people these apps, that allow them to use these powerful new technologies without micromanaging them, without telling them what to do, without freaking out too much about message control, are going to benefit. And those who are, obsessed with control and top-down hierarchy are going to probably be too scared to embrace these tools and miss out in a big way.
I'm wondering how effective these media are for really discussing issues. I think we went through a period where issues got turned into sound bites and there wasn't a whole lot of substance to the discussions, but I think people are craving, especially as we go through a prolonged period of economic malaise, craving more discussion, more substantive analyses of what's going on, not just domestically but internationally. Can we or are we utilizing these social media as much as we could in terms of discussing the issues?
Well, first of all, there's no doubt that the level of average conversation on the internet is not exactly high-level discourse. There's a lot of mudslinging. I mean, spend a minute in the comments section of any YouTube video and you will, never want to again. But I do think the potential is there for truly high-level discussion. Television places, unless you're on a wonderful public broadcast program like this where you're allowed to talk for a while, television places extreme constraints on what you can say. Because like you said, it has to be crystallized into a soundbite. Soundbites never tell the whole story. And the great thing about the internet, the great thing about YouTube, there isn't a time limit. And I think one of the things that, frankly, from the 2008 campaign was surprising, it was sort of a revelation to us. We realized that the very substantive content, the policy speeches that Obama gave, the in-depth, nitty-gritty policy videos that we were putting on YouTube, even if they were long and wonky, people actually were hungry for this quality content. People were watching this stuff. So I think the potential is there because you don't have these constraints that you have in these traditional broadcast media that rely on, advertising space, crowding out ability to have a full, fleshed-out conversation. What's really cool, I think, is Twitter, for example. What Twitter is doing is it's creating, in a sense, a 24-hour press conference. Where you don't have to be a journalist to ask a question. You can be an ordinary citizen. You can ask a question you're probably not going to get an answer if you tweet at Barack Obama. But if you tweet at, one of his communications directors or, one of his press secretaries, you might get an answer, even if you're not an important, famous journalist. And so it's giving ordinary people the ability to ask these kind of more substantive questions beyond the kind of general horse race questions you see in most press conferences. So the potential is there. I don't think the conversation has gotten to the high quality conversation that we would hope for, but I think it can get there.
I worry in particular that the discussions regarding foreign affairs are few and far between, and there was a period in the 1990s when we kind of pushed all of that aside because we were reveling in the economic successes, and now we're mired in economic woes, and again the international seems to recede or even be pushed away, and yet it's more important than ever. Yeah. Is there any way to remedy that situation?
Well, I think I think one of the great advances of the internet is that I could watch the Al Jazeera coverage of the Arab Spring on my computer, even though Al Jazeera is not on TV in New York, right? I had streaming access to history happening in another part of the world. And I know hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people in America and Europe and other countries, other continents were watching what was happening, with the Arab Spring live. So I think again, there's this potential where the internet is, giving us access in an unfettered way to what's happening in other countries. Not just being able to read newspapers in other countries, but literally to be able to watch these live streams, to be able to, I can go on Facebook now, and I can, if I wanted to, I could join, one of these groups forming, for the Arab Spring. The group that started the Arab Spring, or the group that was one of the early groups in the Arab Spring in Egypt, was a group called We Are All Khaled Said. I could join that group if I wanted to. I could actually talk to Egyptians who were part of the Arab Spring. I mean, that is an incredible thing. So again, the potential to connect with people in other countries is there. Look, the downside to the internet is that a lot of the silly kind of inflammatory stuff ends up crowding out the vast potential for meaningful interactions. I'm ultimately more of an optimist than a pessimist about the internet, but I'm very, I'm not glossy-eyed about some of the negative sides of it. But I do think, ultimately, the potential is there. There are, often the loudest people on the internet are some of the more extreme out there people. But there are, the vast majority of people on the internet are ordinary people who are probably well-meaning people who are interested in reaching out and learning about what's happening in the rest of the world. And they're probably being somewhat intimidated by that loud minority. But hopefully, as the internet progresses, we have to remember the internet is still relatively young. When I was in college 10 years ago, it was barely, Google had just started, So as it progresses, I think the level of conversation will veer away from the kind of crazies to more, productive discourse.
Do you think that, thinking about the Arab Spring and the social media aspect, do you think that social media can, of course, help drive events and drive developments, but do they raise expectations perhaps to a point that's too high? I think a lot of people were excited that people didn't like their leaders, and so they set out to change them, and they didn't like their governments, and so they tried to start a process that would modify the government. But when you look at the results, where are we relative to where we were, and our expectations being met?
Well, and you could say the same thing with the Obama campaign. A lot of people thought, oh, we're going to elect the president, we're going to elect this guy president, he's going to immediately change the world. And so, obviously with the Arab Spring, you're seeing in a lot of countries, there was this unbelievable enthusiasm and excitement. Some of the leaders of these countries were ousted, but then, frankly, chaos broke out in a lot of these places. Social media is an incredible tool for fomenting mass movements. I'm not necessarily sold on how great of a tool it is for good governance and for civic community building. I think there's potential there, but it hasn't